Thanks for coming to the Rivers Coalition. It's our April meeting, and we'll kind of get started. First order of business, if you would, join me in the Pledge Allegiance to a flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Be seated. All right, we're going to get started. We got a good agenda. Today's talk and presentation, we're going to be with Eve Samples and Gil Sarp. We're going to be talking about the legislative updates, and of course a very critical time right here at the end of the legislative session when everybody's rushing around up there in chaos to try to get bills passed and things happening. So we'll see how things are going, and we appreciate their input on that. Before we get started, a couple of business matters and membership roll call. All those who are members, be sure you sign in. There's a sign-up sheet going around. There's a clipboard here with paper, so we can get a count of who's here. And then on the phone, if you're put in the chat, you're one of the members of the coalition, please put that in there, and we'll get a kind of roll call on that and as your members. Other guests that are here today, thanks for coming. We also want to have a new member. The board considered a member application just on this Monday at the board meeting for the Everglades Foundation. And the Everglades Foundation has been around for quite a few years, based out of the south of us, but they have done a lot of work in all the Everglades restoration work, and including our area. So I want to just give a minute to Bradley Watson, who's the regional director up here for the Everglades Foundation, to welcome him and welcome as a member. Come on up, Brad.
Thank you very much, Mark. It is a pleasure to be here. We are very grateful to be made a formal member of the Rivers Coalition. The Everglades Foundation, for quick background, is dedicated to restoring and protecting America's Everglades through science, policy, and education. While we are a new member, our organization has been laser focused on Stewart, on the St. Lucie Estuary, and the communities that are a part of it and make it since the last summer of 2013. The synergies that are found between these communities and the importance of restoring America's Everglades, I don't need to tell anyone in this room, but we are glad to play our role and now formally as part of the Rivers Coalition to support the restoration of America's Everglades and help reduce the discharges here in Stewart. I will also quickly add, toward that end of playing our role, we are hosting a large America's Everglades Summit in June in Washington, D.C. It'll include a summit itself in the United States Capitol in the Congressional Auditorium, as well as a big dinner that evening, and then we'll all ascend on the Hill as a community in a very timely manner post the president's budget we're expecting here soon. So some of you already have the information, and I'll make sure to share with the leadership of the coalition so that the Rivers Coalition and this community can have a strong role in participation, not only here and in Florida, but in the nation's capital as well. Thank you very much again.
Thank you and welcome. Welcome, new member. We also received a very nice donation from the foundation, the Kaler Foundation, just recently. So we very much appreciate all those donations, contributions to help the River Coalition cause. I just mentioned too, the water quality obviously has gotten better since we've kind of stopped those Lake Okeechobee discharges, obviously from the Lake Okeechobee recovery operations, and Major Bell from the Corps is here today to talk about that as well. So we've got him. I just spoke with Lawrence Glenn, if you remember, from the Water Management District. He's basically taken a position at in FDEP and dealing with the director of all the BMAPs and watershed work that they do at Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So he's kind of shifted agencies, and they have a new scientist there who took his place at the district in presentations along with John Metnick at their governing board meeting, which I met her just last week too. So wanting to, again, engage both of them back into Rivers Coalition meetings. I might also mention that and we can talk about this later at the Water Management District, but at that governing board meeting, They also announced that they were appointing 2 new members to the governing board. If you remember, there was a vacancy, the 9 members, there was 8 members, so they appointed a new at-large member and another at-large member. One was Thomas Hurley, he's from this area in Hope Sound, and then the other is Robert Spotswood Jr. from down in the Keys. But those 2 have been appointed by the governor, and it was that day that we learned about that appointment to the governing board. So we'll talk further about that, but I wanted to let you know that I have invited them on behalf of the Rivers Coalition. I've invited them to attend the meetings. They couldn't come here today to this meeting, but I have set up a time to have a sit down and talk with them and have some more input from them as we go forward. So, all right, moving on to our presentation today. So we've got a great talk. If you guys want to do it from there, I can give you the mic here. And Gil.
I'm just going to kick it off and hand it over to Gil pretty quickly. I'm Eve Samples, Executive Director at Friends of the Everglades, also on the board of the Rivers Coalition, and we're going to give you an update on legislative session. So the 60-day session is scheduled to end a week from Friday. There is some chatter that session may be prolonged this year because the House and Senate are quite far apart on the budget. And Gil's going to give an update on that and some critical bills that I know the Rivers Coalition membership will be really interested in hearing about. Just a little bit of background on why we at Friends of the Everglades track this so closely. 3 years ago, we received a grant, a 6-figure grant, to elevate our legislative accountability work with the recognition that newsrooms all over the state used to have Capitol bureaus, and we don't have as vibrant a press corps in Tallahassee anymore. So we need to bring information back in detail, actionable information back in detail from Tallahassee to Stewart, to communities across the state. So engaged people like you can act on it. You all come to these meetings every month and you deserve the best possible information, and you need to know who to contact to make your voices heard so we can all fight for clean water more effectively. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Gil to talk a bit about our priorities and where they stand.
Hi, everybody. So we have been tracking the Florida legislative session very closely. Everybody can see this up here, right? Okay. And hopefully everybody on the Zoom can see it as well. Legislative session started in March, Tuesday, March 4th. It's allegedly, or it's supposed to end next Friday, but it's not going to end until they've passed a budget, and they haven't even really gotten into the budget negotiations yet. So there's talk that the legislative session is going to be extended. No, we don't know how long. There are significant differences in terms of what the House and the Senate want to spend. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we went into this legislative session with an eye on, we at Friends of the Everglades have every legislative session identify a certain number of our top priorities for the session. This year, you can see our number 1 was the Rescue the River of Grass campaign, which I believe Eve talked about at our last meeting. Protecting wetlands is always high on our list. Protecting Florida state parks, particularly in lieu of the development proposals that occurred last summer, was high on our list. Taking bold steps to improve water quality. Don't ban fertilizer bans. Some of you will remember, I believe it was a year, maybe 2 years ago, when there was an attempt to pass some legislation that ultimately might undermine fertilizer bans. So that has been a top priority for us since then. Smarter controlled development and sugarcane burning. So let's jump right in with a pair of bills that has been top of our agenda just because it's a very high profile. These are the state parks bills, Senate Bill 80, House Bill 209. I have nearing the finish line here because the House bill has already passed the full House. Senate Bill 80 has been running into a little more turbulence. This past week, it passed its final committee stop where it fended off a rather hostile amendment which would have explicitly allowed the development of some of the things that people protested against last summer. It would have allowed state park, or rather golf courses. It would have allowed pickleball courts with a high hurdle, as Senator Joe Gruder, the sponsor of that amendment, noted. It was voted down unanimously. Gruder was the only one who voted for it. So Senate Bill 80, as it stands now, is headed to the Senate floor. But we still have some issues with this bill. It's better than nothing, I suppose. But we have some concerns about the language of the bill, that it's not tight enough to really head off these threats sort of at the pass. And so what we're advocating for is for the Senate to take up the House language. Representative John Snyder is the sponsor, chief sponsor of House Bill 209. Snyder, I have to say, was great to work with during this process. We made suggestions and he listened. He took up the language that we suggested to tighten his bill and amended his bill to reflect the changes that we had sought. And we were very pleased with House Bill 209. The language is much more restrictive than the Senate Bill 80 language. And so again, we're looking for the Senate to take up the House language before it passes this bill. Do you want to add to that at all?
I think Senator Harrell is receptive to this idea, but she needs to hear from you. And we issued a targeted action this morning from Friends of the Everglades. If you get our emails, you may have seen it. If you don't, just go to everglades.org and you can put in your address, fill it out, and send a message to your specific district lawmakers. It's really important between now and Tuesday, when the Senate is scheduled to take up SB 80 on the Senate floor, that they hear from us that we want that strong House version of the bill to be incorporated.
Moving right along to an issue that is getting a lot of attention, sort of now, maybe a little bit later in the session, has to do with mitigation banking. Some of you may be familiar with the concept. The general idea of mitigation banking is that if I am going to build a project or do something that's going to harm or destroy wetlands in my local watershed, I'm supposed to mitigate the impact of that, ideally by doing something in my own local watershed. And one way you can do that is via buying credits from a mitigation bank, okay? This legislation, Senate Bill 492, House Bill 1175, would make it so that if I'm going to destroy wetlands here, I don't have to mitigate or make up for it here. I can go to another watershed and buy mitigation credits generated, maybe let's say in Leon County, okay? So if there are no mitigation credits available, or there are not a sufficient number of mitigation credits available to offset the impacts in Martin County for my project, I can go to another watershed and buy those mitigation credits. Now I have to pay more. And this legislation would also allow mitigation credits to be issued and sold before wetlands restoration actually takes place. So we have, and like I said, this is getting a lot of attention. Senate Bill 492, I believe, has already, it looks like it's on the special order calendar. It's going to be on the Senate floor Tuesday, same day Harrell's State Parks bill is. And the House bill is on the House floor. Again, there's been a lot of pushback on this because if you think about it, what this ultimately allows is more destruction of wetlands in areas that have already seen a significant amount of destruction of wetlands without having to mitigate in that watershed. So let's say the St. Lucie watershed, has been devastated by, wetlands destruction, and you want to build a project that's going to make it even worse. Well, you can buy credits. If this bill passes, you can buy credits up in Leon County, and that's okay. That would work, right? So what you're going to wind up with is a place like Leon County may have the best looking watersheds around, right? But the places that have already seen development impacts and where there's no mitigation credits available to offset new impacts, they're going to continue to make those new impacts. They're going to be allowed to continue to make those new impacts. So that's particularly dangerous for communities where there's already been a significant amount of development, where there's already been a significant loss of wetlands. Do you have anything you want to add on that? This, follow me on the twists and turns of this one. This one is another one that we had our eye on since the legislative session began. And it has to do with a concept called agricultural enclaves. An agricultural enclave, think of it as sticking out like a sore thumb, all right? Think of it as a piece of land, agricultural land, that is surrounded on at least 3 sides, depending on the size of it, maybe 2 sides, by existing development. Okay, all of us might be able to sort of think of, an example of that, right? Under this proposed legislation, such areas, the owners of an agricultural enclave would have to get it determined, would have to get it designated an agricultural enclave by the local government, say Martin County. But if they were able to do that and they wanted to develop that piece of property, they would not have to go through the normal public approval process. No public hearings. They wouldn't have to have public hearings. They wouldn't have to stand and take questions from folks such as yourself about the development. They could seek what's called administrative approval, which means the county commissioners or the local town commissioners could approve it themselves without a public approval process. The whole idea, and one of the bill's sponsors actually said this early on in the process, is to make it easier to develop. Initially, this language was in Senate Bill 1118, but that bill sort of bogged down in committee. It's not going to pass. So what happened was the language, the agricultural enclave language, was almost like a surgical operation. It was cut out of that bill and it was dropped into this Senate Bill 1080, local government land regulation. It was amended to include this language. That bill was actually voted down in the Senate yesterday. I think it was 19-18. And what was interesting was there were a number of senators, Republican senators, who in many cases have been very, very friendly to the issue of development, who actually stood up and opposed this, saying that they had heard from county commissioners in their district, they had heard from local government officials that this was a terrible idea. This was going to facilitate more and more reckless development. And as such, they voted against this. In fact, one of the senators, Senator Blazing Goglio, had before the final vote, offered an amendment which would have gutted this agricultural enclave language. The amendment was voted down, but then the bill itself was voted down. So it looks like maybe we won one here because there is no corresponding House bill with the same agricultural enclave language in it. So right now, there does not exist a bill that would advance this idea. Now, we're in the final weeks of session where bad ideas never really die. They can always be picked up and grafted onto other legislation that's moving through the process. So we're keeping an eye on that. But for the moment, it looks like maybe we won. Maybe. We'll see. Okay, thank you. Moving on, Senate Bill 7002 and the potential impact on Everglades restoration. This is styled as a good government bill. It's already passed the Senate. The House bill has not passed, but I'll get to that in a second. This measure would so this measure came from Senator Jason Brodeur. He introduced this, and when he did, he put out a press release saying, among other things, that he was concerned about what he called, quote, mission creep among the state's water management districts. And that, in other words, the state water management districts, in his view, are beginning to do things that, is beyond their purview. Okay, so this bill was designed to sort of, in some respects, rein in what the water management districts are doing, specifically looking at some of the business practices. And it specifically targeted the South Florida Water Management District to a much greater degree than other water management districts in this bill. It's hard not to see this bill as an attempt to sort of, I don't know, say lessen the focus on Everglades restoration, because that's such a big part of what the South Florida Water Management District does. And an issue in the bill that we've got a bit of an issue with has to do with the Locar Reservoir, the Lake Okeechobee-Caponado Reservoir they want to build north of the lake. The Senate bill specifically authorizes the district to begin looking for land. It doesn't authorize any expenditures, but it authorizes the district to begin putting in process this whole idea we're going to build this reservoir north of the lake. That, in a way, conflicts with what we've been talking about with Rescue the River of Grass, specifically because we believe that reservoirs south of the lake are going to have much, much better bang for the buck than something north of the lake. Something north of the lake is going to be focused largely on water supply. Will have a much greater impact on water supply than it will in terms of Everglades restoration. Is there anything you want to add anything on that? Okay. Interestingly, the House bill, the corresponding House bill here, which is House Bill 1169, is headed to the House floor. It does not include the language about the Locar Reservoir. So at some point, those two bills are going to have to be reconciled. It either will or it won't authorize the district to begin the process of planning for Locar. But we don't know which one it's going to be yet. This being the Florida legislature, there were, in fact, some good ideas, some good bills, and they went absolutely nowhere. One of our favorites this year was Senate Bill 1646, House Bill 1575, water quality improvements. Among other things, it would have required state agencies to create plans to prevent and mitigate harmful algal blooms and take action to ensure nitrogen levels continue to drop in Lake Okeechobee. We've been asking this for a long time. This is attacking pollution at its source. Prevent and mitigate harmful algal blooms. So predictably, neither bill has had a single hearing. Other bills that would have been good, but went nowhere and are pretty much dead now. Nothing is technically dead, but for all intents and purposes, Senate Bill 156, House Bill 73, the Safe Waterways Act. that was proposed last year, among other things that would have created a responsibility for more and better signage when there's fecal bacteria contamination of waterways, that sort of thing. Advanced wastewater treatment, auxiliary containers. This is an issue to talk about here for a moment because there is a bill that's gotten a lot of attention, House Bill 1822, I believe it's House Bill, no, Senate Bill 1822, that would preempt local governments from regulating auxiliary containers. Think of like a takeout box, when you go home from a restaurant, that sort of. A lot of municipalities, local governments are looking at these things. You've heard about straw bans, plastic straw bans, that sort of thing. This is in a similar vein. Senate Bill 1822 specifically prohibits local governments from enacting any prohibitions on the use of such containers. There were some competing bills which would explicitly allow local governments to I'm drawing a blank here, excuse me. Allow local governments to regulate such containers. They went nowhere. The other one that would preempt it is moving. It's on the Senate floor, so I'm not sure how that's going to play out, but it's something we're keeping an eye on as well. And then lastly, for the overview here, has to do with the budget. As noted, they are miles and billions of dollars apart. The Senate proposal is about $5 billion more than the House proposal. Senate's proposing $750 million for Everglades restoration, which is close to the total about $805 million that DeSantis has proposed. The House at this point is talking about spending only $357 million on Everglades restoration. The rationale being in their telling, there are huge sums of money that have been allocated from previous years, which has not yet been spent. And so why would we allocate all this additional millions this year when that money has not yet been spent? Now, there's a rejoinder to that, and it has to do with, fiscal years and et cetera, et cetera. Ultimately, the House and the Senate have not even really begun to negotiate in earnest on this. There were some talks yesterday, apparently, and there's some movement, but I believe they have not yet appointed budget conferees, which is the conferences that are going to actually hash this out. So again, we're supposed to be done. The legislative session is supposed to be done next Friday. But given that how far apart both sides are on the budget and the fact that they haven't even really begun to negotiate in earnest, suggests that we are not going to be done next Friday and that this is going to be dragged out for a while. You may have seen, too, Governor DeSantis and the House have been going after one another here. DeSantis has, in recent weeks, been bashing the House for its meager proposal in terms of Everglades restoration spending, among other things. It's going to be interesting to watch that play out, but it suggests that whatever the final figure for Everglades restoration spending, it's likely to be less than what we've seen in recent years. And it's entirely possible that the era of ever escalating expenditures on Everglades restoration is over. What that actually means to Everglades restoration spending and Everglades restoration projects, be one that, we have to see. But, you all know, and we've all sat through plenty of presentations talking about how record levels of funding have led to all sorts of momentum on some of these projects. It's entirely possible, again, when you talk about legislation like that Senate Bill 7002, looking to rein in water management district business practices, and now less spending or potentially less spending, it's easy to see that momentum could kind of peter out. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on, which we are doing, part of it. All of this and more can be found on Friends of the Everglades Legislative Accountability page. On our website, we have a running list of bills that we've been watching this session and how they're doing. We've got sort of an archive of some of the material we've been putting out. We've done some live streams, and we'll be doing another end of session live stream whenever the session ends. Eve and I have been talking about these things on our social media pages and just doing what we can to sort of raise awareness of all of it.
Thanks, Gil. Gil does an exceptional job tracking all this fast-moving legislation, and we've spent more time than ever in Tallahassee this past session. And I want to encourage you all by saying that we have heard lawmakers, more than one, say that email input has convinced them to change their mind on bad bills or to support a good bill. We heard this on the state parks bill. Gil just referenced it on the agricultural enclaves issue. So the organized input that we are all providing, not just here on the Treasure Coast, but statewide, is making a difference.
Very much so. I was watching some of the House. The House was in session yesterday, and I was watching it just to keep track of some of the bills we're following. And one of the members noted she'd received 1,000 emails on one of these issues, and that got her attention. So that's why we do what we do in terms of what we call the direct action, is the email where we're asking you to reach out, to call, or to email, because they definitely notice. If they get 1,000 emails, a couple thousand emails, they definitely notice that, and they definitely take that as the community is voicing its pleasure or displeasure with whatever the issue is. So please, for those of you who have done that, thank you. For those of you who haven't done it, definitely think about it, because it makes an impression.
And bonus points if you take to the streets, as we have done in our community for state parks, as we have done in our community to stop toxic Lake Okeechobee discharges. So we have a long tradition of that here, and let's keep it up. All of this is really important right now because we're at a moment where we're losing some of our federal backstops in terms of protections. You may have seen the news that the Endangered Species Act, there's some rulemaking that is weakening those protections. The Clean Water Act has been weakened due to U.S. Supreme Court ruling. So the state of Florida still has pretty robust wetlands protection. We don't. Got it. But we are losing backstops at the federal level in this moment. So it is more important than ever for us to pay attention and take action on the issues that matter most to us. And again, our lawmakers are listening. So I'll just wrap it up. If you can move to the last slide, Gil. Thank you. Oh, sorry. We'll circle back to the Rescue the River of Grass campaign that I presented on at a previous Rivers Coalition meeting. Thank you to the members for voting to support this effort to acquire about 100,000 acres south of Lake Okeechobee. Just want to reiterate that this is going to remain a legislative priority because we have the money. It is all of our money. Voters approved Amendment 1 back in 2014, the Water and Land Legacy Amendment. It will be generating $1.2 to $1.6 billion a year for another decade, and that money goes into the state's Land Acquisition Trust Fund. And we need to, again, bend lawmakers' ears to tell them how we think they should spend it and where we can get the greatest bang for our buck. And we have known for decades that land acquisition south of Lake Okeechobee to store and clean water, to send it south, is the solution to our problem here in the St. Lucie estuary. It's the solution to harmful discharges on the Caloosahatchee coast. And also it's the solution for the Southern Everglades and Florida Bay. All of you in this room, you come every month, you know these are the answers. And I just want to remind you that we have a source of money and we need the political will to get that done. And you're going to hear us talking about that more and more as we end this session and have the 2026 legislative session in view. God help us all.
Don't threaten me.
Thank you all for your attention on this. Thanks, Gil, for the overview.
Time for maybe some quick questions, and I could start out by asking Gil and Eve, is there something specific you think that the Rivers Coalition ought to take a position on, or to at least notify our legislators from us that says it's particularly related to the waterways that we really need to protect here? And is there one of those bills and one of those things going forward? And I know it's a moving target kind of thing.
They're all moving targets at this stage of the game. The wetlands mitigation bill
Yeah.
is one that, is, and I don't, it would be good to reach out to Harold, Snyder, Overdorf, our local folks, and just tell them, hey, you got to vote down on this. Because there's going to be impacts. There's going to be impacts. There already is some pushback on those bills. They haven't sailed through their committees. There's been some opposition. There's been some good questions raised, but they're poised to pass at this point. And so that would be something I would say to focus on. And maybe, in the future, the Rivers Coalition would be good to maybe prior to the legislative session, map out what are our top 3 priorities, that sort of thing, and that these are the things that we're really going to focus on, and then keep an eye on the legislation that's coming through. And then if one is applicable to one of those priorities, that would be an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, as Gil mentioned, there are, the organization, Friends of the Everglades and other organizations like Florida Oceanographic and others have legislative priorities. And as an Everglades Coalition, 60 organizations, we went up on, and even you were part of that. We went up, did 60 meetings up in Tallahassee, dropping off the legislative priorities for Everglades Coalition, which include a lot of what we're talking about here. Mainly funding and appropriations is really a key. So on the wetlands mitigation thing, I think without, a necessary thing, if it were, I could maybe get a letter off to our representatives and delegates there with this idea about let's not vote for that. Let's cut off the wetlands mitigation bill, because it does,
gonna have impacts,
going to have impacts to the river. So we can at least take action in that direction, and then, but encourage you, like Gil and you did, to go on their websites and other websites and look at how you can take action, how you can send emails on what bills are really critical to your organization or what you're thinking about. So please do that, take some action. It's a moving target.
Sure.
And what's going to happen, it looks like, is that special session is going to go on, and that means that there may not pass the appropriations bill. That's the one bill they have to pass, both House and Senate have to pass before the end of the legislative delegation, or session. But in this case, they may have to go to special session, which may not start for another month or so, and then call a special session to do that. That's where the conferees come together, both the House side and the Senate side. They come together because they can't agree on the appropriations bill. They have to come together and work things out and then put stuff in. And I just raised this big flag of caution, which Gil had done before. And you all remember that things that don't go through this process of 3 committees going to the House or Senate floor, getting voted on up or down, if those bills or parts of those bills don't go through, people up there like to slip them in to the appropriations bill. Remember 2508? Does everybody remember that number? That's what happened in a lot of cases, that they slip into the appropriations bill, that one paragraph or whatever that didn't get through in their bill they wanted to get through. So they get with the appropriations committees and say, hey, let's put this in there. Yeah.
I would expect to see something like that with that agricultural enclave language, because again, it was already rescued from the one ship that was sinking, put on another ship, that ship got shot down. I would totally expect, if an effort's going to be made like along the lines of what you described, I would expect to see it with that, and maybe other things as well, but there are some folks who seem dead set on pushing this whole bit about agricultural enclaves through, and that's how you can do it.
We want to, stay tuned for what's going on right now. So either support or oppose certain bills or things that are going through, like the wetlands mitigation stuff. But further eyes continue to be on, and the focus will be on the appropriations bill as it goes forward. So all of our folks here, we're going to be focusing on that because we know that's where things get slipped in. Question from Jim, and then we'll go to John.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gil
Jim
and
and
Eve. One of the things that I would recommend people be cautious of is preemptions by the state on virtually any growth management issues for the local authorities, because these are where things tend to get, locked in later in the budget negotiations. And there are some other websites that have really good information on that, like 1,000 Friends have been tracking some of these preemptions on local control in a slightly different sort of perspective than water quality.
Jim, just the preemption controls are like, when you heard that about the auxiliary containers thing, okay, that means that the state wants to preempt or stop any kind of, they want control over, in this case, local growth controls, which the local governments have certain controls right now. But if the state passes legislation, that would preempt them from passing. That's right, Jim? Okay. Yep, Jim.
Yeah, how are we gonna get a hold of or get the attention of Brian Downs?
Get the what, Brian?
The attention of Brian Donald.
Oh, Brian Don.
Yeah, the next governor.
Explain who's Byron Don.
There are advocates in his ear currently, I think mostly in Southwest Florida. But yes, every candidate that we see put their hat in the race for governor needs to have their ear bent on our issues, and we are prepared to do that.
Yeah. Yep, and at those meetings up there, I just want to say too, I was at the Everglades Coalition. We sat down in one of our meetings with Senate President Ben Albritton at the time. And the last time I kind of sat down in the president's office up there was with actually Joe Negron up there at the time. But we had a chance to sit down with him, and he emphasized just what Gil had brought up about this is going to really be maybe a really bad funding time for anything Everglades restoration or water quality improvements or anything. Even though he gets it and he might understand, yeah, how valuable it is to do that, he's saying it's all going to get down to the matter of money and how much money is going to be applied to that. And it's very chaotic up there right now. So, all right. All right. Thanks very much. Again, thank you, Gil and Eve, for keeping up on all that state and federal stuff. So we'll move on to Martin County updates and updates from our agencies. So starting with Martin County and then City of Stewart. So John's here. Yay.
Morning. Thank you, Mark. I'll make one add-on observation about the session this year that's just, I don't know, I think it's just interesting. I don't know what it means. I'll leave it to smarter people to interpret, but normally this time of year, so yesterday was the 50-day rule where, you know, things that haven't had a committee approval are kind of dead unless they get some circuitous route to the budget or something like that. Normally by this time of year, there'd be 200 to 300 bills that have been enrolled, which means it's passed both chambers and has, you know, is ready to be sent to the governor. This year we're at 18, which is, you know, you guys can probably sort through as well as I can what that means, but it's just, it's a really different year in terms of how much legislation has made it through the gauntlet so far. The only thing I really wanted to point out for a water quality update today is that we've noticed some pretty significant filamentous algae blooms in the estuary. If you're out there, you may be seeing it too. I sent Todd a picture. I think I also maybe accidentally put some bighorn sheep in there from Yosemite. It had nothing to do with the estuary, but you can have, you know, that's just for you, Todd. We can only really conjecture. We've also seen, you know, correlation isn't always causation, but we've also seen a pretty significant increase in clarity since discharges have stopped. Probably the nutrients were still there, and so the algae was, you know, just sitting there waiting for some sunlight because it's a photosynthesis using organism to soak up those nutrients and bloom. Our hope is that because it's, you know, we still have a lot of growing season left for seagrass meadows, that this will run its cycle and maybe dissipate some with giving the opportunity for seagrass to really take off. We're still seeing some really good seagrass rebounding. This isn't ideal to have a bunch of filamentous algae tied up on it. It tends to pull some of it out when the currents come in and also shades the grasses. It's not ideal, but we'll keep an eye on it. That's all I have unless there's questions.
Thank you, John. Yep. Okay, yeah. She asked about, no, go ahead. What filamentous algae looks like.
It's stringy, gooey stuff. You can actually, like, we've done some experiments with it where we've gone out and you can kind of harvest it up with your hands and hold it, as opposed to like what we're typically seeing in freshwater cyanobacteria where it turns into like a talcum powder almost. You can't really hold it. This stuff it's like stringy, gooey, soft stuff. And we notice it more. Like you have to kind of go look for it when it's in its life cycle as it mortalizes, it floats, and that's when you see that really nasty, gooey stuff on the surface. It's everywhere, really. Anywhere where you would typically see seagrasses, you're probably going to find this stuff right now. If you want to see like a really bad example of it, right across from Bathtub Beach, where we found the champion mangrove tree, that's the famous landmark now. There's a boardwalk that goes out to a pier and a little kayak launch. It's really bad right there.
Yep. It's a filamentous, it's actually a cyanobacteria. Lyngbia it's what it's called. You'll see it, it's brown, kind of filamentous, and it floats up and then it becomes pretty noxic looking, if you will, and it smells bad. If it dries out, it starts really giving off an odor. So it's actually a cyanobacteria called Lyngbia. And if you recall, Mike Houston from Martin County presented here a while back to the coalition about the seagrass and seagrass things, and he showed how Lyngbia could be affecting the shading and everything of seagrass. So that's an important call. We've got next up is Ben Hogarth from City of Stewart. And again, thanks to City of Stewart for updating everything, and see Commissioner Collins here and others. So thank you to them, and thanks for being here.
Appreciate it, Mark. So today we were talking about legislation, but before I get into that, I just want to say, looked at the ENSO El Nino, La Nina kind of forecast for, this came out, I think, a few days ago, the most recent one. But when I looked at the outlook for the next few months, it actually looks pretty good based on the recover metrics, based on the recover goals and all that. And I know we're in, I think, day 9, 10 now of the being underneath the recover metric. And I know the goal is somewhere between 60 and 90 days. So we're hopeful with this new ENSO forecast that recover won't have been for nothing, that we will be able to retain the lake at that lower level. So that's a good outlook for now. Still don't know what that means for the tropics this season, because it's been kind of crazy out there. But at least on the water side, we're hopeful for that. Since today's the kind of legislative, that's what's on the menu. I think I should speak to kind of some of what the city's been talking about as far as growth management. I know Jim brought that up. Part of my job also with the city is to provide legislative updates for the city. This is my 12th legislative session with Florida, between county and city government, 2 years in the county and 10 years with the city. And yes, it does feel like for someone like me that it's gotten worse year after year as far as local order, local home rule. I think it also actually has. That's not just a feeling. This year, just like most years, we come under attack from just an inordinate amount of bills. I've seen years where there were several thousand bills filed, and then later years like this year, there are only 2,000 bills are filed. So it's a lot less work for me. But of 2,000 bills, I ended up having to directly follow about 250 bills. And many of these bills involve land development and growth management challenges for local governments. And some of these would completely strip not just our local officials from the ability to manage multifamily large developments that come into your community, the largest of those developments, in fact. They would completely remove the transparent public processes that go into it. So that means instead of having these ordinance hearings and stuff in front of commissions where you come out, you state your opinion, you never come out, you never state your opinion, the commission never states their opinion. Staff members in back offices have to just line for line review an application by these developers. Does it meet basic code? Does it meet basic everything? Okay, check the box, move on. No public hearings, no nothing. So that's what we're looking at. I'm not trying to paint the bleakest of pictures, but some of what is being adopted, and at least the aim of the legislature is more and more that direction. So that's a pattern that's very concerning. Certainly, as Eve and Gil have said, being proactive does have an effect. We just need to be more on the ball more often. And the last thing I'll talk about legislatively, because the money came up, is the challenges for local governments also have been myriad over the years. Infrastructure, I don't want to say is failing. I'm not trying to paint bleak pictures, but infrastructure is certainly aged substantially, and not just here, across the entire country, and aged well beyond the years it was ever intended to. So what I saw in the last 12 years is, on average, every year between $1 and $2.5 billion just in the state of Florida of local requests for water projects specifically. You've seen how much the legislature is looking at for a budget this year. I think it's like 115 billion or so dollars. I've seen legislative years that was only $80 billion budget for the whole state, and still those requests were that amount, and it was pretty consistent. The reason I'm bringing this up is back in 2019, 2020, DEP and the state of Florida and the legislature started requiring some new stuff for cities and local counties and government agencies to do before they can even request for money. So instead of asking our legislators for money for water projects, now they put it through a grant process. Why is that important? Well, in previous years, we would ask legislators for money, $2 billion worth of requests. We might be lucky in any given year that 200 million of those were funded. So percentage wise, that's not very high. And so now with this grant process, we have to be competitive with other cities and counties and meet the standards. I could tell you this, the good thing between the city and Martin County, and John can tell you too, is that we've been very ahead on getting what we call vulnerability assessments, which are very similar to like stormwater master plans. There's a lot of crossover. They're requiring these plans and these assessments, and I think it's important to pay attention to these because we can't ask for any more water dollars unless we check these boxes from the state, and they're trying to make a uniform method across the whole state. Which has, there's pros and cons to that. But the reason I'm bringing this up is you see a lot of frozen money or money they're saying is sitting out there. Well, all of this came up in the last few years where we have to start meeting these new requirements. And it wasn't until this year, just a couple of months ago, that for our grant and for our vulnerability assessment, we finally were able to check the box, got approval by DEP. And so now the city is once again re-eligible after all that time to go back for water project money. So I'm hoping that we'll see a surge in cities and governments actually asking for that money again. But that's part of this process. When the state creates new rules that kind of hamstring you, you have to go through this whole 2, 3, 4 year process to recertify, and that's what ended up happening to us. So again, as of this year, we're able to go for water project money again. And I suspect that the monies that haven't been spent or have just been kind of sitting there in the ether will once again be requested, and that'll be a good thing. It's just, I wanted to put a little bit of perspective at the local level about why these challenges exist and what we have to go through to at least satisfy the state. So again, we're seeing more and more hamstringing at the local level, and we do the best we can to advocate, but at the end of the day, who they really want to hear from is you all. So appreciate it and appreciate being proactive. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for updates. It's great. Moving on to kind of the South Florida Water Management District. Again, we don't have anybody here from the district. Usually Lawrence Glenn or somebody would be here. We did meet at the last governing board meeting, which was April 10th. We met it's kind of the new Lawrence Glenn, if you will, who took Dr. Cassandra Armstrong. She is now co-presenting with John Mitnick at their technical reports for the water quality updates, water updates at the governing board. What happened at the governing board, I told you early on, was initially when they appointed 2 new members to the governing board. One was to replace the open position that Jackie Thurlow-Lippisch was in that position for many years. And that was an open position for a long time. So reappointed a position there. Tom Hurley out of Hope Sound. He's with Becker Holdings, Land Holdings, kind of development oriented. And then the other was for replacement of Cheryl Meads. Cheryl Meads was not continued, and the appointment came for her position to Robert Spotswood. And Tim O'Hare, our TC Palm reporter, knows him pretty well and has been in the Keys for a long time. So it's a longtime Keys family, and both of them I've reached out to, invited them again to this meeting, but more importantly, I've set up a time to sit down and talk with them next week, so we can I can touch base, tell them our issues, our coalition, what we're about, and why it's important for us that they understand our positions on all these things. And when they see us at the meetings, they'll know what's going on. At this governing board meeting on the 10th, they basically, one of the big issues is they were told not to bring up the Southland project. And you've heard from Eve before, and Gil was there to talk about it, but they were told not to bring it up, and the director went around to all the commissioners or the governing board members to not talk about it, except for Ron Bergeron, who came late to the meeting. And then so Ron didn't know that, so he got up and started talking about the Southland project and brought this whole issue up. The Southland project is a rock mine that's being proposed just north, 8,000 acres north of the EAA reservoir and STA that you've heard about. So it's in sugar land. The sugar wants to sell those lands, and they want to develop a rock mine. This had come up last year, actually in December, or even then before, and the company Phillips and Jordan is proposing that they go ahead and use this as a water resource project. Well, the district had sent a letter and said, well, we might think it's a water resource project, but we still have to review it. Well, they took that letter and then took everything to the Palm Beach County Commission, local planning agency, and they kind of ran it through and they approved, well, we can go ahead and approve this, I guess. So we kept saying, no, should get all the approval as a water resource project because you're not supposed to permit any rock mining unless it is a water resource project in the EAA. So now it's going back, actually, it's going to the county commission. It was supposed to be on their agenda today, but instead the applicant pulled the application and it's not going to go until next meeting, which is in May 22nd. So as an update to that, May 22nd is a date where they're going to be considering this Southland rock mine. We have really great folks in the environmental community, namely the Everglades Law Center, who's working kind of diligently on all the details on this. We use that for guidance, but many of the conservation organizations like Friends of the Everglades, so forth, we've all weighed in to kind of, not have rock mining going on. It's not really a water resource project. It hasn't been evaluated yet, and it actually needs, though, a DEP permit and a Corps of Engineers permit, which they haven't gotten yet. So those are still pending on all that. But the other thing so I brought up real briefly at the district was obviously things about the Northern Everglades Estuaries Protection Plan, as you've heard before, and the BMAP updates. So the BMAP updates are happening for Caloosahatchee, St. Lucie, and Lake Okeechobee. Their comments are due by the 30th. It's not looking like they're meeting, of course, their goals. And I told them that. The last thing I said before I get to Jackie was about their Water Conservation Day. So April is Water Conservation Month, right? And so they were making proclamations to that and recognition. I told them basically, we're not conserving too much water when over this last water year, we've dumped from Lake Okeechobee 850,000 acre feet east and west to the Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico. That's over 276 billion gallons that have gone east and west, into the Atlantic and Gulf of fresh water that normally would go south to the Everglades and rehydrate our aquifers, right, for drinking water. But instead, we've been not conserving it too well by just letting it discharge out to the east or west. And on the way, of course, it damages the estuaries and has a lot of things. To put that 276 billion gallons in perspective, all of us 8.5 million people in South Florida consume about 1.3 billion gallons a day. So that's a lot of water that has gone east and west that could have been used for water uses here in South Florida. So not very good conserving months. So just wanted to bring that up in April. Okay, we're on the district, but any question, Jackie?
I just had a quick question because that's a lot of information that you go through pretty quickly. Hard to keep track. Who did you say told the members not to speak?
Okay, so question is, who did we, what I heard, and Chris Whitman, actually Captains for Clean Water, was over there from West Coast, from Fort Myers, because he was there to talk about the Rockland issue too. And Chris and I talked, and he found out that Drew Bartlett was told by the governor's office, or somebody told him, that said, don't bring up this Southland project and tell the rest of the governing board. And they said, he told the rest of the governing board before the meeting got started, except for Ron Bergeron, who came late and who didn't get that message.
Okay, so the message came from the governor's
Yeah,
office.
governor's office. So the message
And-
also came from the governor's office about the new appointments.
And Drew either told them or someone from staff
Mhm.
told them not to speak.
Right.
That's lovely.
Mhm.
Thank you.
That's it. There you go. So that's kind of the water management district. I think we're going to Lake Okeechobee. I don't think Paul can't be here. So basically the lake, as you know, is it's dropping pretty quick. It's down right now at about 11.62. And Todd, did you have that graph that shows? And then we'll read it right into to Colonel Bell's thing. Yeah. So Colonel Bell, Major Bell, if we could ask you, I elevated you already to Colonel, sorry. we're welcoming Major Bell. He's with us today. He's doing a lot of work. Thank you for coming. And future Colonel Bell, right? So what I also want to iterate with the Colonel who was here last week, we appreciate him being here last week and the Major getting him here. But what was really important about that visit, if you recall from last month's meeting, Colonel Broman said specifically that it was the 2,600 or 2,900 emails that he got that really made him think too about and get more concerned about. So just like we said with the state legislators, they respond or they take notice of how many emails they're getting about things. But we're very glad that Major Bell's here. He's working with an acting ASA, Assistant Secretary of the Army, to tour him around South Florida, and the Colonel with that. He's very busy, and we appreciate his updates here. Thank you.
Awesome. Good afternoon. So I'm going to give some quick updates on Indian Lagoon South projects. So C-2324 STA is on track for completion this summer of 26. So no hiccups there. The EAA reservoir, just a reminder, that's 15 contracts. 4 of those contracts are with the Corps of Engineers. 10A, that's our inflow-outflow canals. That one's anticipated to complete this fall, so that'll be great news for that. And 11A, this is the foundation and cutoff wall before you can build the embankment for the reservoir itself. We're on this is great news. We're on full production for what's called the flowable fill. So this is the material that goes over the landscape before they can build the embankment, which is the next phase of the contract through a different contractor. That's in full production right now. So that means we'll start moving a little bit quicker on those sections. So we'll see a lot more progress for those that go down on that project site. 11B, that's the embankment. Those contractors are mobilized on site and they've started beginning their submittal process. So with the federal government, you have to submit a whole bunch of designs and a whole bunch of paperwork, and we've got to review that before they can actually start construction. And probably to the most for this community, LACO is at 1162, which is great news. We're 10 days below 12 feet, 68 days in the recovery envelope, which is also great news. 0 to the east, which is super great for this community. And we're down to 650 to the west through this S79 structure there. And our latest model from this morning's meeting that I had just prior to this has us projected 138 days below 12 feet. So that's great news. So we'll meet and exceed our standards for the recovery operations that we've defined in LOSUM. So any of your questions?
Any questions? Questions for?
The action review, ma'am?
To determine if this time at a lower lake level actually resulted in SAV
Positive,
regrowth.
yeah, positive or negative gains from the system. So depending on hurricane season, it'll probably be in the fall. So I know for the West Coast, stakeholders engaged me last week on the reduction of flows. So if you guys have feedback at the community, Rivers, EVCO, whomever, have feedback on the operations, just start preparing those so when we have those meetings, you come productive so we can have those discussions, right? So it's not only from an ecological perspective, but communication perspective. A lot what I hear from stakeholders and communities is we're not letting folks know because we're not conducting media calls to let folks know we're making change in operational conditions, right, based on the environment. So we'll take all those in consideration if and when we ever do recovery operations in the future.
We also do the periodic science calls, which are no longer called that, but they're for the north system or the south system, right? And those are like every other week.
Yeah, every
or
2 weeks,
every
and that
2
was the West Coast. They're a little different community, but you meet once every 2 weeks, and it's not for decision cycle that it really doesn't work for folks to be informed. So we've got to kind of figure out how we communicate. And I know for folks that I deal with, if I receive something from our communications team, I try to send that out to the collective folks in the community so that they're aware, because I'm not sure who gets it and what media outlets report on what. So I just kind of send that out to everyone I work with so that at least I'm communicating the message the best I can and the forms I can communicate it in.
What are your biologists saying about SAV recovery in the lake currently?
So we haven't had an official opinion yet. I know that the drawdown's been looking really good. A lot of folks have commented to us, Florida Audubon Society, and other folks have said they've seen great recession rates. The marshes are coming back. SAV's getting a lot of good growth. So we're just watching conditions right now. So it's just what the future holds. So we are anticipating continue to be dry this month. We'll see what the wet season in May-ish timeframe, but again, the wet season, we didn't receive those rains until mid-June last year. So, while we're looking at the lake, we're starting to balance other needs now. So it's becoming a water supply challenge. So we've got and then we have navigation challenges along the Okeechobee waterway. So there's a lot we're balancing right now. So it's just, we're just going to stay positive and see what the summer brings and if and when hurricane season is productive or not and how it affects the peninsula. So.
Do you see those navigation locks remaining closed?
So they're open right now, so that no call outs, so they can just travel through. But the issue is the beams on certain vessels, right? So if you can't navigate through the canal or the waterway, you won't be able to traverse. So, but we acknowledge that. Colonel Bowman met with some stakeholders on that, Indian Town Marina, to understand the responsibilities that he has within the other mission sets he's got to balance. So we've discussed that, but again, it's just when we do these operations, that's one of the outcomes, right, is reduce canal levels. So navigation purposes.
I'm going to another question here real quick.
I was just wondering if you were going to be in charge of the cleanup from the muck that came out? The muck from the.
Yeah, from the
discharges?
releases. Yeah, so I don't think that's it's something that the Army Corps of Engineers is looking at, but I know that other stakeholders are looking at how to do that from their perspectives. I don't want to get into the legalities of what we're doing for operational standpoint, but there is concerns, right? So that's why LOCAR, North Reservoir, naturally the system would work without human involvement and send clean water where it needed to go, right? But the way, since we're involved in the system, if we create these, storage capacities and treat the water and provide clean water into the lake, you would have natural recovery of the SAV, which would then clean the lake, and you would have less pollutants in the water as it's moved through the system. But that takes time, right? And water quality is a state function. We're here to help and assist, but it's not the Corps of Engineers' responsibility to clean that water. We're just, trying to manage lots of different projects, requirements from that authorized by Congress. So we have to balance all those needs and understanding that they do impact communities.
So you were referring to the muck issues that are muck from the lake that are coming into this canal or the estuary? Yep. So specifically, there was an issue like this years back when particularly Palm City Bay was getting filled up in the navigational areas. So it becomes a navigational issue, which the Corps is somewhat responsible for, along with the Florida Inland Navigation District, who maintains the Okeechobee waterway. So their responsibility will be for dredging those channels to get to navigational depths. But beyond that, removal of the muck is also a part of the Indian River Lagoon South Plan, where it's scheduled to remove about 7.9 million cubic yards of muck that's already here in the St. Lucie estuary. That's part of the IRL South Plan. Like C-2324 project and other projects, the component of that is also muck removal, which well, there been talk about where to remove it, to pump it out, to amend it into soils on west of the land here. How to do that is still in question. It hasn't come up for engineering or design yet as that component, but it is a component of the IRL South Plan as 7.9 million cubic yards of muck removal. So we're all looking forward to that because, as you know, even though we're not getting discharges from the lake, if we get high winds or current conditions in the estuary, it can resuspend that muck and silt and sediment, and it blocks the light from penetration to their habitats, as well as cover over habitats like oyster reefs and other things. So muck is not a good thing. It's about 6 or 8 feet deep out here in the middle of the estuary where it settles out in the deeper water. We've got to get it out of the system, and we also have to prevent it from coming into the system. So there's a twofold process there. But as far as navigation goes, again, the responsibility is the Major mentioned about navigational efforts, but also with the Florida Inland Navigation District. So just so you know that. Great. Yes, back in the back. And SAB.
That's a great question. I'm not a scientist. I'm an engineer. So, but we can take that back and provide that for you.
There's bulrush and other grasses. There's, yeah, lake grasses. They're either emergent vegetation, which means emergent from the water, or submergent vegetation. SAV. Submergent aquatic vegetation is SAV, but emergent aquatic vegetation is like marsh grass. And if you see out there that you'll go out in the lake, you'll see these grasses that are above water and they're waving in the wind, but they need that water fluctuation. They need to be down. In fact, there's sometimes, if it gets so low, they do prescribe burns in the lake to kind of get rid of that, all that organic material before it oxidizes down and cause more problems for the SAV habitats. Yeah.
Just had a quick question on kind of a different topic. While the recovery operations were still going on, were they scheduled to do that peroxide treatment and
So that's a great
phosphorus,
question. Yeah, so the testing,
sequestration?
the C44, the HAB, harmful algae bloom testing. So we did receive comments back from Martin County specifically. I know other folks have seen it. I only got Martin County's report. But that testing is contingent upon active algae bloom. And then it's also if we had lake water. So right now we don't have water to conduct those operations. So those are going to be suspended and probably past June, but it'll be dependent on hurricane season, right? So if we have the volume to execute that, so our Engineering Research Development Center, that's what we call ERDIC. They're out of Huntsville, Alabama. It's a separate USAID organization where they're conducting that research study, and it's an injection of a peroxide-based chemical, and along with another chemical that will move those phosphates out of suspension, so it will fall out to reduce those loads, and then it kills the microcystin within the cyanobacteria that's within blue-green algae. So they're conducting that test, and so we met with ERDIC a few weeks ago, me and Mr. Engel and some of our scientists, Dr. Bradshaw, to talk the details, to figure out what the plan looks like, how we're going to execute this. But we don't have the water volumes to execute the testing. So right now it looks like it'll be maybe fallish, late summer fallish, but we need the volume in the lake to execute the test. And we just happen to be doing lake recovery, so we don't have the volume to execute it, plus the active bloom as well. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it had already happened or not, so
Yeah,
that
no,
answers that
no.
question.
Yeah, so before it happens, just so everyone's tracking, I'm going to present some slides. We'll have some technical PhDs here to talk the nuances of all the chemical stuff, because again, I don't do chemical engineering. But we'll have all that. We'll lay out our plan. We'll kind of show you what we've got to do to execute. You have to have control days. So it does require the S80 to be open to make these flows happen. So just be aware of that. But we don't have a full plan because we don't have the volume in the lake to execute the plan. So we're still under development trying to figure that out, but it'll be late September, October timeframe. So.
Thanks, Colonel. Up, Major. Hey, I keep elevating. That's right. Maybe one more question real quick here from Diane.
Your agents who are testing the muck to see if it contains things like PFAS or medical waste?
Yeah, so I can't speak to those details, but I imagine that testing would have to be incurred not only for that stuff, but also heavy metals, right? So there's just other environmental things that have to be considered. So when you move that material off, right? If it's hazmat, it becomes, it's a whole different situation. So I can't speak to the details, but I imagine that'll be part of the process.
So I just want to add that I think it was peroxide and lanthanum. Was lanthanum's like an element on the periodic table of elements? And yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to add that.
That's for the chemistry.
Everglades Engineering several years ago, they took 12 core samples all throughout the estuary of the muck. And then they took the ones that the Army Corps of Engineers did, and then they added 12 more of their own, where they drilled down and took core samples up. And they found out that it's inert. It doesn't do anything. It's the molecular structure of it holds water. So they took a barge of it and they took it out to western Martin County and they spread it out on the field to see if anything would grow on it. Nothing will grow on it. Okay? So it looked like it was caked over, like a desert. It was caked over, but when you walked on it, you sunk down into it because the molecular structure of it still held the water. So if somebody can come up with something that this could be used for, but basically right now it's not toxic and there's nothing in it that does anything good for anybody. That was according to when Everglades Engineering did it.
Yep, yep. Yeah, and as you recall, there was a muck removal out of Manatee Pocket years back, and they actually put it into a containment area off US 1, south of Stewart and south of Salerno. And yeah, so muck is muck, and as Jim indicated, it's a sediment that's very fine sediment that holds that water body. So if you look, it looks dry, but then you touch it or step on it, it's really wet and slick and slippery. It's and the studies also showed us less than 10% in organics. So everybody thought, well, this is great organic soil. We'll just use it and amend it. But as Jim said, it's not. It's a muck soil. It's a very fine silt sediment that's turned into this muck. But it also binds chemicals, other chemicals like phosphorus and nitrogen. And that's, again, the problem with resuspension. And John Treffery and others at FIT have done lots of studies up and down the IRL to show that resuspension is maybe one of the main causes of some of our nitrogen phosphorus pollution, is that resuspension of those nutrients into the water column that are bound up into the muck sediments themselves. So just kind of close out that, but again, thank you to Major Bell. Thanks very much. All right. As far as Dr. Paul Gray, unfortunately he can't be here. He's down at the Coral Springs at the what they call the GEAR conference. It's the Greater Everglades and Ecosystem Restoration Conference, all about science of going on to restore Everglades. But basically the lake, as you said, is 11.62 feet. It's dropping pretty fast. Not only from evaporation off the lake, because you put this dry wind over top of 700 square mile lake, you're going to get a lot of evaporation in thousands of cubic feet per second evaporating off. But they're also releasing about 2,000 CFS to the south through the three structures south into the EAA, but nothing going south through the STAs into the Everglades. So that water supply that's now going south from the lake into the EAA is being used for the Everglades agricultural area water supply. And you've heard me talk many years that from November through the dry season in May, they take about almost 400,000 or 500,000 acre feet off of the lake for water supply. And that's what's being done right now. There are no discharges like going to the east, a little bit going to the west. But there's the Everglades is really south of the EAA, and the water conservation area 3A is right at about 8.4 feet elevation, and its schedule is to be at 9.76 elevation. So it's below its schedule. It's literally that top part of the Everglades is kind of drying up. And this is what we keep telling them, even through LOSUM, is that you got to keep putting this water south from the lake, even during the dry season, because it's got to rehydrate the Everglades very slowly as it works its way down to the south tip of Florida, right? So it's not good for the Everglades either right now, because it's drying up the north part of the Everglades, and they're going to be needing that water too. It's a shame. Yep. A question in the back, Mr. Commissioner Collins, come in. Yep. Real quick.
I just wanted to offer two quick updates from the city. We spent most of Tuesday, the city commission, interviewing with staff, 4 candidates for the environmental attorney position that we're establishing environmental protection. We have one more that we will be interviewing on May 1st as well. And then I believe May 12th, we will be voting formally on who we select for that person to be. And then secondarily, the city, your commission, just as a sense of the tone of the composition now, wrote a letter in support of Major Bell and his extension request in his position with the Corps. So just wanted to give those 2 updates so you know what we're up to. Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thanks, City of Stewart, yay, for getting on board an environmental attorney, and we'll obviously get him introduced to the next meeting and bring him in, whoever that would be. And we appreciate that movement by the City of Stewart, which initiated several months ago. So moving on to any other state or federal legislation.
I'll take 1 minute. So as you all know, the sugar industry is protected in the federal farm bill. The federal farm bill is typically reauthorized every 5 years, but for the last several years, it's just been extended for a year because Congress couldn't come to agreement on the new terms. So the sugar industry, which we talk about at every single one of our meetings, is protected through our water management practices. It's protected through burn regulations at the state level, and it's protected at the federal level in terms of price supports and limits on imports. So we all pay about twice the world market price for sugar at the grocery store. So if this is a concern to you, please contact your congressman, Congressman Mast probably, or your U.S. senators to let them know that this industry should not continue to receive such generous protections in the federal farm bill. September 30th is when it either needs to be extended again or reauthorized for a new 5-year term.
Great. All right, moving on to some coalition reports. We'll start with River Kids. Do we have Kelly or nope? Kelly's not here. Any other updates from Speakers Bureau? Todd Weissing.
I'm Todd Weissing. I'm the coordinator of the Rivers Coalition Speakers Bureau. We did not have a speaking engagement this past month. We like to be busy. So this gives me an opportunity to do a little commercial. If you're a member of an organization, you're looking for a speaker, I don't care if it is a boating group or we've gone to churches and spoken there. We've gone to all kinds of places. Jim likes to stay busy. He's one of our speakers. So if you have a meeting coming up, go to riverscoalition.org, click request a speaker, and we'll be there. Keep us busy.
Thank you, Todd. All right. So as far as local issues and kind of water quality update, you've seen me hosted this up. The water quality is improving in the St. Lucie estuary and the Indian River. We can see that out on the seagrass beds as well. Todd, do you have some thoughts or updates on that?
I can just show a couple of things. And sorry I didn't get your pictures, but Jason just sent me some pictures from Jason Boltman from the floor. So I'll put those up. Let me get my screen shared. Sorry. All right. So just to look at the seagrasses really quickly, you all were talking about the what is it, the filamentous something or other.
Filamentous algae.
You're saying it
Or
back.
lagoon.
So that would be, this is the latest
Second
imagery,
picture.
but it's a little washed out by sunlight. Going back one where it's a little clear. You're talking about right back here behind Bathtub.
That's called Bessie Cove. correct?
Bessie Cove behind Bathtub Beach. But this is where it's been on the satellite imagery looking better. And yeah, I'd be interested in getting down there and see if it's looking more algae than grass now. So that's that. But on the, Mark, you had asked me to put this slide up on the lake level. So, where do we stand in this recovery operation? So we're, getting down to the bottom of the recovery envelope now. And in a couple of days, we should be below 11.5 feet. So one of the criteria too is to be below 11.5 for 60 days. I think you said the forecast was 138 or something like that, 138 days below 12. And so, now the question for, I'm sure, a lot of folks that need water is going to be, when are we going to turn the corner and start heading back up? Because if we, there's a kind of an extension line there. If we kept this up, we'd be into water shortage by mid-May. And we probably will go into water shortage. It won't, it'll come back up, but whether we can come up faster than the water shortage management ban does right there will be to be seen. Other things real quick, if I can get back here. Those pictures that Jason just sent me. So is this the stuff you all are talking about?
Yeah.
And then Jason, you said this was over by the inlet? I think I only got two. This was the other one you sent me right there.
Yep.
So near the Stewart Causeway? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, Indian River Drive.
The question was, is it floating? And yes, it's kind of floating. Doesn't have, even false roots or anything attached to
Yeah,
the
so
bottom,
it's-
right? It's not a macroalgae. It's really a cyanobacteria. It's very filamentous. So if you hold it up, it looks like very fine hair, hair like consistency, not like a gracilaria, which is thick or, I'm sorry? It's called mermaid hair. There you go.
Yeah, that's that stuff you see
Good
kind
name
of.
for it. Except
Yeah.
if you like brunettes, right? Okay.
Yes, folks.
or redheads. There you go.
Us folks that have been here for a while remember Jensen Beach stinking pretty bad back in the
Yeah.
old days. It used
Yeah.
to stink up the whole downtown, Jensen. I think
That's
so.
the
It was
thing.
that stuff that, yeah, used to kind of float. It was also just the seagrass. We
Lindia.
had so much seagrass, the seagrass would kind of loosen up. It was
It can be
rotting
combined with
grass.
that, and
Yeah.
it can be, but it is the rot, it smells like rotten eggs or rotting eggs, yeah. This, zooming in on these images is really good. Todd, as he indicates, those are the
these are the
sandbars
floods
of what
here.
we call the flood shoals of about almost 400 acres inside the St. Lucie Inlet to the north there. We look at those, and even though they get shaded over and you can say, well, that might be seagrass, we have to go down and ground truth it, for the very reason that it could be the floating algae that's over top of those sandbars. Kind of looks like, oh, well, look, they're covered in seagrass. So in cases where the images look a little darker on the sandbars, we have to actually go out and make sure then monitor those. So University of Florida, IFAS, through Vincent Encomio and others have initiated, they had a good talk just last week, and they put up a QR code, which we'll post on our website, for observers like yourself or like Jason or others who are out there from May 1st through May 30th. They would like you to take pictures of what you see, just like Jason did, of seagrass or any kind of algae. There it is. Jason's got that handout right there. So if you want to take a picture of that, and then he can, we can spread the word around that, take pictures, put those observations into UF's project there, and we'll get some good inventory of kind of what's out there. That's a really good way to do it, with involving us as citizens out there in the wild. All
Yeah.
right. So, yeah, good question. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. It's prevalent mostly in the summer months when it gets real hot. The water temperatures get real hot, and it kind of floats to that surface. It actually develops gases that float it to the surface. It's worse. It can be worse, but I have seen it really, really bad years ago, and it does float up on the shore and get stranded and get oxidized, and it can really cause not just the odor, but it can be, somewhat toxic if you're exposed to it. So we have to be careful with it. Yeah. Sure, it can be cleaned up, but there's no agency, there's nobody responsible for that. There's nobody out there saying, hey, let's clean this up. The way to clean it up is to not have the nutrient inflows into the system that allow it to bloom as much as it does. Just like any other algae or the cyanobacteria we talk about, those are fed by sunlight, by the warm water temperatures, and also by the amount of nutrients that are in the water to help it grow. Just like every plant or other kind of things that we have. So we got to be careful where it is when you see it, observe it, maybe report it, and it may become part of this Safe Waterways Act if we can get, they always wrestle with bacterial sampling. So same with bacterial sampling for fecal and other bacterias that are in the water that could be harmful to human health. They also should probably start monitoring this particular cyanobacteria called Lingbia. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Okay. Right. Yep. Yep. Let's hope it kind of runs its course. All right. We got other local issues, Riverkeepers update. Okay, John. Yeah, real quick.
Quick additional comment on the Lingbia. So we've been doing some different experiments with it. Removal is hard and not terribly smart. We found that no matter what we attempted to do, you were impacting the seagrass as well because it's so bound up in it. Mark's right. The best thing is nutrient removal to prevent it in the first place. And we've sent some stuff we've collected some and sent it to labs. We're trying to do some nutrient composition analysis and then also hopefully do some source tracking for those nutrients that we find in it, just to help us target where to address water quality concerns to prevent those nutrients in the first place.
Yep, and we're working too on seagrass kind of restoration efforts along with Mark County. We have some projects, sites up and down the IRL and also up in Fort Pierce area. But the project we're working on, you may have heard about the clams, the Campchensis or leucinid clams that are small clams that are local to the area, but they found that they help, their gill systems help to ingest the sulfides in the sediment. So the sulfides in the sediment in seagrass areas are detrimental to seagrass growth. So we're working on a project that combines clams with the seagrass restoration efforts to see if that helps the seagrass growth effort. So there's a lot of things going on the science of restoration and also doing some restoration efforts. Jim, on Indian River Keeper.
Yeah, so the Lyngbia also has a lot of hydrogen sulfide in it, which is why it smells bad. And so there's this feedback loop between the Lyngbia and the soils. And if there's a lot of Lyngbia, then the chances for that seagrass recovery are reduced because they are more sensitive to the hydrogen sulfide, apparently. The seagrass is recovering, pretty steadily throughout the lagoon. Mosquito Lagoon is really sort of kind of the best recovery project. We're seeing more manatee, more, healthy, proper foraging, a lot of green sea turtles. I've been noticing green sea turtles trying to pick the Lyngbia off the seagrass before they eat the seagrass. So they're being a little bit, finicky. I think that in general, the lagoon is looking better than it has for a while, although there's still a lot of sediment that's stirred up by boat traffic and by the dredging operations and some of the other things that are going on simultaneously. So it'd be great to give the lagoon the very best head start it can have, and perhaps we can work better at that locally. I really think that we need to, as local boaters and local concerned citizens, be aware of our impact on the local ecosystem, because it does have an impact. I mean, the more we stir it up, the less healthy the ecosystem is going to be. We're seeing quite a few manatees that are having issues with digestion, which is something that shouldn't be happening. And we really don't know why. I mean, it looks like a digestive funk that happens. And so I don't want to get too terribly into that because I just don't know. But we're seeing a fairly large proportion of the manatees that are being necropsied from the southeastern region having this digestive, it looks like IBS or some sort of irritable bowel syndrome that it's happening, and they're not thriving. So, for the last couple weeks, they've been failing to feed, and so they have been feeding, and for some reason they're not. I've been giving a sort of an update on right whale action in Florida. We have had 2 right whales that have behaved very unpredictably. You might remember in late January, Curlew and Koala came by Stewart Inlet. They ended up going to the Super Bowl and hanging out in Louisiana and Alabama, and then they were off the Panhandle for a long time. Late last week, they were in Bimini. So these 2 big adult females looked like they were pregnant when they were down here. No sign of their calves. They are now probably heading back up to Cape Cod Bay to have a good feed. But, one of those things. And I think that points out that the more we think we know about what's going on in these ecosystems, the more complex they really are, and perhaps more study is needed. But anyway, thank you very much, and please go out and enjoy the lagoon. It's a beautiful place.
Thank you, Jim. We've got some member updates, and I know we had somebody from St. Lucie County River Keeper. You want to just kind of introduce yourself? You just came to the meeting today, but.
No updates today, but my name's Nicholas Lenahan. I'm the Stormwater Program Coordinator for St. Lucie County. I work on the BMAPs, data collection, so many different things there. But I'm going to bring some of our people down to give you some updates. And I just wanted to attend today and see what it's all about. And thank you for having me.
Well, Nicholas, thank you. We've been trying to get, you know, St. Lucie County and engagement from north of us for a long time. Guardians, you know, do you want to give a little update? I know Merritt Matheson's not here today to talk a little bit about the update on where we are with Martin County Forever.
Sure, I will. Thanks, Mark. Just a note for anybody who is interested, there's going to be a little recognition function on this Saturday. I think John Mayo will be there for the folks who were instrumental in getting the Martin County Forever program passed. So that's going to be from 12 until 2 down at Jonathan Dickinson. Anybody who is interested, feel free to come by. Thanks.
And they have set up that committee, I guess, on the 16th or something. They had their first kind of organizational meeting. Merritt reported to our board. Our board is Merritt's on the board. So he's going to keep us updated and informed as it goes on and when their next meeting is to consider those lands for acquisition. So as you know, the voters voted, it's passed, the tax is in place, they're collecting money, so they can also go forward with some of those purchases and hopefully bond those or get some conservation easements and get things rolling. But it's, they're having their next meeting, I think next month sometime, and Merritt will keep us up posted.
Mark,
on that.
he's
Yep.
he mentioned that they have, usually the one passing the mic. He did mention that right now they're tallying up the funds, so as soon as they get that totaled up, he'll report back.
Excellent. Any other Rivers Coalition member updates? Thanks again. Welcome to the Everglades Foundation. Thanks everybody for coming. Stay tuned. Go to our website. Mickey does a fantastic job keeping everything posted. If you have something or something comes up, get it to Mickey so that we can get it on the website and keep everybody posted on things. And also look at the back of your list and with your magnifying glass, read all the 105 members that we have and try to help get us more participation, engaging them to come to meetings or participate in meetings. All right, see you in May.